Great art and fine food collide in this special edition of Art Rocks. Could the delicate flora of a Louisiana marsh inspire a sweet and fragrant dessert? What chef could look at the subtle beauty of those oyster shells without thinking about the seafood dishes he'd love to create? Fantastical creatures seem ready to leap from the canvas. But what will these mythical deer inspire Chef Michael Gulotta to serve? That's all next on Art Rocks, the Art of Food.
Support for this program is provided by Georgia Pacific Port Hudson operations. Like the impulse that drives an artist's creativity, Georgia Pacific's 850 Louisiana employees are driven to produce quality paper products for your home and business. With additional support from the Renaissance Baton Rouge Hotel, centrally located for business and pleasure travel, the Renaissance offers intrigue, style, and southern hospitality. And by the Watermark Baton Rouge. Art, history, and commerce come together in the heart of downtown Baton Rouge at the Watermark, located in the historic Louisiana Trust and Savings Bank building. And by Prescience Point Capital Management, a fact-based private investment manager using forensic investigation to benefit clients. Research with impact. And by Ann Conley Fine Art, with the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.
Hello, I'm James Fox Smith, publisher of Country Roads Magazine. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Art Rocks, in which a trio of contemporary Louisiana artists are teaming up with an accomplished chef to create a unique art of food dinner, coming to the state capital, Baton Rouge, later this month. The dishes served will be created by New Orleans chef Michael Gulotta, the visionary behind acclaimed restaurants Mofo and Maypop. But first, let's meet the artists. There is much in Billy Solitario's oil painting to whet the appetite of Gulf seafood lovers. But growing up in coastal Mississippi, with the twin constants of sea and sky as his canvas, the artist devotes equal attention to capturing the beauty of the coastal Gulf's sea creatures and the splendor of the summer skies above.
Still life and landscape. Those are my two favorite genres. I was born in California. I grew up in Goshen, Mississippi, which is right on the Gulf Coast, a little small town. I was fortunate enough to grow up right on the water. I had a little john boat and a little 5 horsepower motor, and I'd go out and we'd go crabbing, we'd go fishing, we'd go oystering. That was kind of my summer camp, was just spending all that time in nature. And as I got older and started being interested in art, I always knew what I wanted to paint would be nature. One of the best parts of landscape is showing incredible depth. It doesn't come naturally. You see it naturally. You can understand it naturally when you're seeing it in nature. But to translate all that depth onto a two-dimensional surface takes time, it takes energy, and takes study. There's different types of perspective. There's linear perspective, there's atmospheric perspective, there's color perspective, which is kind of more complicated. These are different ways of showing depth on a two-dimensional surface. I studied under Oscar Ozals at the New Orleans Academy of Fine Arts, but also studying through observation and just starting to see and starting to understand. It takes a lot of work to do it, but it's a lot of fun once you know how. I would consider myself to be kind of a classic realist. It's representational painting, but it's not photorealism. I feel that there's expression in the bold strokes, and then at the end I come in a little bit tighter. But there's still paint on the surface, there's still that quality that you can see. The problem with learning how to the craft of painting is that you tend to want to be very representational once you learn it. As I get older, you start to back down and you start to become a little looser and less interested in just the craft and more interested in the emotional part. One of my favorite subjects is clouds, and one of my favorite foregrounds is the Mississippi River. I love having large cumulus nimbus clouds, the big ones that are coming, that are the most dramatic. They have the rain, the lightning, of the thunder. They are the grandfathers of the clouds. And I love having the Mississippi River at the bottom. I love the fact that we can have this incredibly large container ship that's only this big. And the cloud is gigantic. It's this wonderful play on what we think as humans is big. Nature is 5 times larger. And here in New Orleans, we are very familiar with nature, and with every summer, we all get ready for the hurricane season. We are always reminded how precarious we are, this little tiny sliver of land surrounded by all this water. In a way, I like my landscapes to be a metaphor for this nature versus our little sliver of land at the bottom. Another one of my favorite still life subjects is the oyster, specifically the oyster shell. It's a fantastic, simple little creation. We all know the mother of pearl, and all the colors of the rainbow are contained in it. It's subtle, it's beautiful. The shell for the creature itself, it's magnificent. The grays inside the shell are surrounded by greens and purples and little subtleties of color. I'm often painting them in series like that with the shells, and also I love putting lemon wedges because the strong yellow light versus all the subtle colors in the oyster. The crab on the tomato is a nice little piece. What's interesting is that the idea of putting it on the tomato is simply a fact. I'm trying to take this crab that was alive very recently and make it look a little bit more alive as well. It was more of a practical situation of trying to figure out a way, instead of having the crab just laying flat on the surface. And I noticed that by lifting him up a little bit, you're adding some more character to it, you're adding a little bit more narrative to it because it looks like it's more alive. I'm much more interested in this not as a piece of food, but more as a living creature. The blue crab is incredible too. It has worked so hard to create all these beautiful colors, every single color of the rainbow, the reds, the oranges, and the blues, and the pinks, everything. We think of it as this kind of this creepy thing that's crawling around the mud, but it's working really hard to become this incredibly beautiful thing. So to achieve the effect of water, or to understand the shape and to paint clouds, once you understand painting, it's just like everything else. It's value, and it's drawing, and it's design. A drop of water is, we perceive it to be a certain thing, but in reality, it's just a value and some edge quality. The crawfish on the garlic, or crawfish riding a garlic, it almost looks like. In the garlic itself, you can see at the end, the highest value is almost pure white, just laid on in a very thick manner. While the highlights along the back of the crawfish, again, are laid on there. I'm from the school of thought that says drawing is everything. I'm constantly drawing. I usually work wet on wet, a la prima, meaning that you're working very quickly, almost one sitting. Sometimes I'll do all the painting in one sitting by putting down thinner layers at the beginning and then fatter layers on top of that and heavier layers on top of that. You're able to get a lot of depth within the painting, even in one sitting. Sometimes a week later I'll realize, it needs a little something here, it needs a little something there.
It's easy to see why any chef would be drawn to Billy's paintings of crabs, oysters, and speckled trout. But wait till you hear what Chef Michael's thinking when he looks at those clouds in Billy's work. Now, Dumont Matsuo works his kind of magic in Baton Rouge. Informed by the masters of Dutch mannerism and the flowing forms of Japanese art, Dumont has a fascination with exotic mythologies and its creatures. Largely self-taught, he transforms discarded materials, scraps of paper, fabric, paint and salt into fantastical beasts and these amazing geisha.
I grew up playing a lot of video games, and I grew up looking through a lot of art books because I stayed in the house a lot. So I finished the Encyclopedia Britannica when I was really young. But these happened because I saw things on people's walls or in museums, and I want them myself. That was the original reason for my art, but I used to do martial arts, and that's where the Asian thing came from because I was really kind of angry kid. My favorite martial artist was always Miyamoto Musashi, and he, at the end of his life, just stopped fighting, and you just become more zen, and that was the whole goal. I covered a whole canvas in paper, different type of paper, collaged the whole canvas, and then I do a wash of gesso, and then I draw all my forms on the canvas. I've always liked geishas because I like the movement and the fabric. I was reading all this stuff about the Silk Road. All those are not ones that you use for Japanese art. There's some Japanese pieces in it, but all the rest is actually from the Ottoman Empire because I know they had really nice silks and really nice velvets, and I thought it would go with the form, and I thought that you couldn't tell that it was Ottoman or that it was Japanese. The thing I like about Japanese work is that they always have these flowing forms, and I've always wanted to be able to do that, but with paper, and try to make it flow like they did, but without just line. I'm more partial to just doing line, but as of late, I've been thinking I'm getting good with color. That's why I told myself. And so I started to do things so you can see the form, so you can see the paper, so you can see it move. I'm starting to be able to make it move. And I'm like, wow, I can do that. So I make it move, you know? And then it looks like fabric. And you may think it's just Japanese, but it has Chinese, and it may have Mongolian and anything. Then there's Russian textiles, but that's for me. That's not for you to know. This is for me to have fun because I get bored real easy. So I have to do things to make it more fun. That painting is fighting ghosts. It's two fighting ghosts. There's a tengu at the bottom, and then there's a fox spirit at the top. And the fighting ghost was big for me because I wanted to exercise a lot of anger I had inside of me when I was young. Martial arts made me look at things a lot prettier and made me see that my hands can do a lot more than just break stuff. But I still can show that and still make it pretty. The theme of ghosts is because ghosts are ephemeral. Supposedly I saw them when I was a kid, and supposedly they followed me when I was a kid. Because I'm Creole, so they always have stories for everything. Hokusai is one of my favorite artists, and the reason why my name is Daemon Matsuo, my favorite haiku poet is Matsuo Basho, and supposedly haiku poets, whenever they move to a new town, they change their names. So when I was young, I changed my middle name to Matsuo. The knot on the other one's head is actually from like a robe that you do in no dance. I was really into all the Dutch artists, and they always have hunt scenes. There's always hunt scenes and everything going on. But I like the mythology of it, like Actaeon, when she looked at Diana and she sent the dogs after her, and he turned into a deer. I like all those ideas, so I wanted the myth of it, because deer in Buddhist mythology is a kind of divine animal because they go and they disappear. You see them, then they're gone, but that's everything is ephemeral. And that's why I use deer for me. And a lot of mythologies use them. And then I just got obsessed. I'm like, man, I know the bones, I know all this stuff, I know how they move, and I just got obsessed with it. So I just started doing it more and more. I always wanted to make things pretty. I always wanted to make a myth and make it pretty, because I'm a storyteller. I can tell stories. That's always been my talent, but I didn't know how to tell it in front of you because I'll hide in a second. These I can't hide. I can just put them out there and then just go somewhere, and then they talk about it later. I went to LSU, but I didn't take the prerequisites because I went to Ed Promick and I said, can I take your class? I promise you I'll impress you. And I didn't take any of the prerequisites. I think I should have now. I think I learned more at 200 Government, which was like a studio commune, because there were so many kids and so many talented people come through there, just pop up. We were just people it was an old Coca-Cola building. We only had to pay for electricity. We had bands in there, and we just lived in there, and people would be coming through all the time, and then you can just try everything.
Daemon, he's infiltrated kind of our Baton Rouge creative community, and he's been here for a long time, and he kind of started from the bottom, working out of warehouses, showing his artwork on his own, just kind of on the side of the street near LSU. And then from there, it's those kind of intangible, what we call 10,000 hours, that really divides any artist from being a professional artist who's working and living and producing something that's truly unique.
Mia Kaplan draws her inspiration from the wildlands of southeastern Louisiana, specifically the woods and waterways of St. Tammany Parish's Big Branch Marsh. Using a process that she describes as foraging for images, Mia filters the flora that she discovers through a process of abstraction to create 2- and 3-dimensional images that vibrate with the energy of life. Take a look.
I go into the environment where I grew up and I draw from life. I spend time observing. I personally found that I was really drawn to floral forms, environmental relationships between trees, lights, canopies, positive, negative space. I break my time down seasonally, so it's very much like a plant. I spend a large amount of time outside, just gathering drawings, documenting things. There are so many weeds here, like dandelions, for instance. They grow all over the place here. Dandelions have wonderful medicinal qualities. Same with like the primroses, like you can make a tea in order to induce labor. Hibiscus is used for different things. I'm fascinated by how nature is so important to the balance. We learn so much about life by studying nature. Depending on whether the intended output is paintings or sculpture, I go between the two mediums, and I find that the order of them tends to be drawing, paintings, sculpture. Drawing, paintings, sculpture. When I first started working in paper, I defaulted to the form of paper folding that I know most, which is origami. My brother used to do origami all the time, so some of my early works are origami-based forms, like camellias, cranes. But I found that when I was sharing them, a lot of people, all they can see is origami. They're not seeing what I was trying to express, which was this idea of transformation. I'm really interested in life cycles and transformation, which nature's the perfect place to study. I started opening up to the idea of working in different materials. Aluminum is very lightweight. It's not the easiest thing to fold and form, certainly not as easy as paper, but I don't care. I do it anyway. Like, I just muscle it out. Sometimes I have to I fold it and then I'll stand on top of a pile of it. I just make sure that it happens. The way that I compose these pieces is I start as a painter. I'll start with very simple, clear sheets of aluminum, primed, all stapled on the wall. And then I will paint all of the sheets of aluminum at once, which is why they look like they're part of the same family at different times of year. It's because they're created in a body of work all at once. After the aluminum has dried, then I just get my scissors out and I just start cutting forms and reconstructing them, which is where it's like in your mind you're starting over. Whenever you see a piece of aluminum that's ready to be folded, you have to be open to the idea of it becoming whatever it wants to become, because when you start folding it, the material speaks back to you. I don't want to go this way, or maybe I should go here. And so when I'm folding these, I put them to the side. I fold another one, I put it to the side, and then I start finding ones that just seem to go together, pieces that seem to relate to one another in an interesting way. And so I'll start pairing them back together, reconstructing them. When I was asked to create a steel sculpture for the Poydras Corridor Sculpture Exhibition in New Orleans, my friend at the time had said, do you think you can work in large-scale sculpture? And I said, yeah. When I went to go look at the materials, the steel kind of reminded me of sheets of paper, which is completely my comfort zone. So I translated my work from one medium into another because of the sensory qualities of the material. So steel became paper. So my work, even if it's in steel, it has this lightness to it. There are 3 works that are paintings presented as tapestries, and they feature trees. The trees at that point for me became almost like stand-ins for people in a theater. They came at a time where I was having a hard time getting along with someone really close to me, and we went out into the swamp, and I just saw these trees leaning on one another for support. On the left side of the photo, you'll see these 2 cypress trees leaning on one another, and there's a setting sun behind them, and they're supporting one another. There's humanity in there. People tend to gravitate towards the use of color in my work, and I think it's because we love color and we associate that with color. So my colors tend to be very joyful and uplifting. The background of these paintings, like for instance, you can see this and the little bean shapes and things that, they have their forms. There's a framework in this painting which is drawn from one of my illustrations of spiderwort, which grows here wild. It's a native plant. When I'm speaking to people about my work, a lot of people will say, I don't understand abstraction. And that, to me, it made me really sad because there is a logic to it. drawing from something which was identifiable allowed me to create conditions that could be understood, and I think it makes it more digestible. It's like going into the cellular structure of like what makes something magical and special, and in this particular case there's all this energy and movement and density, and like you can see like hints of other flowers peeking through, and that's it. That's what the painting is. My favorite collectors are the ones that really, they feel that joy, they feel that uplift. I do have some work in the Mary Bird Perkins Our Lady of the Lake Cancer Center, and part of their healing arts program. And Linda Lee, the administrator of the hospital, came up to me and she said so many people were coming up to the receptionist and saying, I'm seeing all sorts of stuff in that. I'm seeing wild turkey and clouds and birds and mountains. And she held me and she said, do you realize that just for like a couple minutes, these people who in many cases are fighting for their lives are just imagining what something could be, like the power in being that type of distraction. It added a whole new layer of gratitude to my work and why I love doing this type of work. To be able to create something that naturally comes from me, but that also has the quality of being able to happily distract someone. It's a gift. I feel like I got a great gift to be able to do it.
In a swamp, surrounded by wild hibiscus flowers, honeybees and apricot-scented chanterelle mushrooms, what sort of dishes might a wildly inventive chef be inspired to create? In a few minutes, Chef Michael will tell us. But first, let's listen as he explains the culinary principles that guide him every day as he prepares dishes for his two New Orleans restaurants, Mofo and Maypop. In a place like New Orleans, with such a distinctive culinary culture all its own, how hard is it to do something really different?
What I love about New Orleans is that it always takes the best of every culture that lands at its port. If you go back and you start dissecting the cuisine, you really see all the cultures that act on, from African to French to German to Spanish to Italian. I'm mostly Sicilian, but then also the new round of Vietnamese and Honduran are now starting to make their impact as well. And so, especially at Mofo, I love taking those new impacting cuisines and sort of showing like what is the fine line between a sauce Creole and a curry. When you have all these layers of flavor, where we use the more Creole Islander sofrito of onions and peppers and garlic, where they're using ginger and garlic and lemongrass, there's really not that big of a difference. What I love though is how the Southeast Asian Vietnamese cultures really brighten up. They're almost better built for the humidity and the heat of New Orleans. And I love that. I love playing off of that because there's all these parallels between the two cultures as far as river deltas and both being French colonies and having similar growing seasons. So you can really play off of that. And so what I do is I take the richer cuisines of New Orleans, which were really impacted by the smokiness of the German cuisine, all of our smoked sausages from the German Bayou, and then the heavier roux and the cream and the butter of the French influence, and then those really robust flavors from the African influence, and I like brightening them with the ginger and the galangal and the lemongrass and the lime leaf of Vietnamese and Southeast Asian cuisine. The great part about food is that there's a lot of art to it, and I think it goes further than just color and plating. We kind of have to think of both sides. So while we do worry about building a beautiful plate because people do eat with their eyes, we also have to think about the structure of the flavors. We have a big rule at Mofo where it's hot, sour, salty, sweet. Everything has to be in balance. So when you're tasting a dish, we always make the cooks eat a dish from start to finish, because as you progress, there may not be enough acid to carry all the way to the end. There may not be enough spice to carry all the way to the end. So by the end, you end up tired of eating the dish. The dish has to stay exciting from the first bite to the last. So we think a lot about that, as well as texture. Is there something smooth? Is there something crunchy? Is there something, are these textures balanced out? If the whole thing is just mashed and smooth, well then maybe that's not very interesting by the time you're done. Maybe there has to be some kind of crunch added to it, or maybe there has to be maybe a sauce that can complement. And so there's multiple layers and directions to go with that. So it all sort of ties together.
Now that you know what's going through Chef Michael's mind as he steps up to the stove, let's see what inspiration he got from his visits with Mia, Demond and Billy.
I'm actually surprised at how much I get to learn why they approach their art the way they do, and obviously everyone, you know, has a backstory and a reason, and I think that sort of opens up the possibilities and finding those pathways, because a lot of these people I have things in common with. I spent a lot of my childhood on the Gulf Coast, so the pictures of the sea and the beach and all the seafood really resonate with me. But I spent just as much time in the outskirts of New Orleans in the swamps, so seeing Mia's approach to all the wildflowers and the bees, you know, those are all things that I'm very comfortable with as well. Billy's work, really, I think I can do something really fun with crab meat and oysters, and I love how he does the clouds. I've done a lot of work with being able to froth and foam things to make them seem lighter in texture and airier. And so I'd love to do some sort of mix of crab meat and oyster and with a light, I don't know, maybe drawing from like a lemongrass and coconut foam over oysters and crab salad or something along those lines. I think that would be really fun. For the wild game, I really haven't thought as much about that one yet, but I love if I could get my hands on some boar or some venison. But I always also think about the time of year, so in August, in my mind, game is a winter thing. But you can still do something fun and light with game. I just need to figure out how I want to do that. And then with Mia's work, I love working with hibiscus syrups. When we were out there, I saw these bees flying into all the flowers, and she kept commenting on how pretty it was to watch the bees crawling in and out. So I'd love to do something with honey and hibiscus. And then being in the swamps, I don't know how I can work it out yet, but whenever I'm in the swamps, it reminds me of chanterelles, because that's where we get all our beautiful chanterelles from. So I'm figuring out how I can do a dessert with chanterelles and flowers and honey. So that's kind of where I'm going. I don't want to make any commitments yet. You know, I think I have to let everything process a little bit. I've gotten to see everyone's artwork. I think I need a few days just to make sure. Well, one, I want to make sure that it's delicious. So I gotta know that I can pull it off.
Our first Art Rocks dinner, held at LPB, was a tremendous success, with the proceeds benefiting the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting. The latest Country Roads benefit dinner for LPB takes place at Baton Rouge's Anne Connolly Fine Art Gallery. No one knows more about the ways in which art inspires life than gallery owner Anne Connolly herself, and here's why she's excited to be involved.
Well, we're excited to feature 3 artists that have distinctly different styles, and to bring that experience to the public and to the people that want to participate, and to witness how the chef is going to take their distinctly different styles and interpret it through his artistry. And Michael Gulotta, as we all know, is a big rising star. The gallery is going to be a great place to showcase that collaboration of artist and artist chef. I always love to collaborate with strong community partners. It just shows authenticity in the community, and it helps build cultural awareness.
So that's going to do it for this special edition of Art Rocks. But remember, you can always find episodes of the show at lpb.org/artrocks. And if you can't get enough of Louisiana's unique culture, Country Roads magazine is a great place to discover more about what's going on in the arts all across this state. So until next time, I've been James Fox Smith, and thank you for watching.